Welcome to the Orange Hammer Podcast. My name is Corbett Storick. I've been a licensed general contractor for 8+ years, specializing in new construction, renovation, furniture building. I'm the son of an architect and an interior designer, and I've been surrounded in this industry since birth, watching all aspects from concept, design, build, punch list, and of course, all the problems that come up in between. In my time in Durham, North Carolina, I've noticed a significant gap in knowledge between homeowners who need work and the people who do the work. On this podcast, I hope to break down the process of homeownership from the perspective of both the homeowner and the contractor in an effort to help raise the knowledge of homeowners about their homes and the construction/renovation process. I hope you enjoy. If you're enjoying the Orange Hammer Podcast, or if you have a topic that you want covered, or have recently done a project, please contact the Orange Hammer Podcast. The Orange Hammer Podcast is on Instagram and Facebook. Please like and subscribe, share on whatever platform you're enjoying your podcast on. Also, check out our YouTube channel, The Orange Hammer. The Orange Hammer Podcast is proud to be brought to you by CRS Contracting LLC for all your construction and handyman needs, new buildings to renovations, furniture building, EV charger install, or even a TV mounted. You can call me, Corbett Storick. It'd be my pleasure to help you. You can find me on Instagram at CRS Contracting. WSDG, the Walter Storick Design Group, specialists in architectural and acoustical consulting. Check out WSDG.com. And Taylor Bragg, for all your artistic needs in all mediums. You can find her on Instagram at brag_about_art. That's brag, BRGG, with 2 G's. She's the fantastic artist behind the Orange Hammer logo, and she did my fantastic table painting of my podcasting table. Everybody, welcome to the Orange Hammer Podcast. Today, I've got the privilege, the honor, of having Margaret Sapp come in. Margaret, how are you doing this morning?
Doing great. Thank you, Corbett. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. This is pretty cool. I mean, we ran into each other as random as it gets, both you as a professional realtor showing somebody a property and me just going along with a buddy of mine who was putting in a bid or potentially going to put in a bid to purchase the same property. It was an open house, or I don't even think it was technically an open house. It was just a showing. Just a showing.
Yeah.
And
totally random.
Totally random. And you were one of, I think, 3 different realtors that showed up either before or after or during that I was like, hey, here's my card. Everybody needs networking. And I don't know, 5 days later or whatever it was, you were like, I have a unique situation. And your situation is definitely the first I've seen it. It was, well, I guess I should ask, do you mind we detail that for listeners?
For my own situation? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
obviously,
fine.
we're not putting your address or anything out in the public, but
yeah.
We're talking about a single family, 2-story home that has a window issue. And for a little context, it's brick facade, which is a fancy way of saying that the house is framed out of regular wood 2x4s, but the outside is brick siding. So it looks like a brick house, but in fact is not a brick house. So this is a little important because of how you construct things so the the windows have to be perfectly fit into that brick opening. Unlike a conventional home with a different type of siding where you have an inch or maybe even 2 inches each direction of wiggle room where you pop the window into the frame, shim it, install it with screws or nails or what have you, and then the siding usually butts to it or stops an agreed upon distance, and then you put trim. Why am I saying all this? Because 20 years later, when you want to swap those windows, it's very, very easy to pop out the trim on the outside and on the inside, of course, and see a bunch of nails and screws and pop out said nails or screws and just put in a new window. And you got a little wiggle room, retrim it. With brick facade, the wiggle room is removed. You called me out because we were both hoping that well, let me back up. The problem with your windows was that they were warping. They were forming like an Aladdin kind of shoe with like a ski slope kind of, where the top of the window is up and down, and then as you get lower to the window, it's becoming a slope. Mm-hmm. And we both knew that was a combination of sun just doing what it does, worse so in North Carolina than other places, but then also most likely probably a slight improper installation. Mm-hmm. We were both hoping that the window could maybe just kind of be bent back, secured tighter, something like this. Unfortunately for all of us, upon viewing it, that was simply not even an option at all. You have a unique, higher quality window where it's a combination of materials, wood and vinyl, or wood and metal, forgive me. Mm-hmm. It's a higher grade window. Honestly, it's amazing it lasted this long. That's probably attributed to how good of a window it is, because had it been, the low grade vinyl windows that, I'm putting in a rental property because it's a rental property, it probably would have failed significantly sooner. And do you have an idea of the time frame of those windows? Are they original to the home?
They are original, yes.
Yeah. And how old's the home?
2000. So
2000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're 22, 23-year-old windows. Mm-hmm. I mean, for improper installation and NC heat, mm-hmm. that's good. Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah, except not real thrilled to be in the situation that I'm in. But
obviously, for you right now in this situation, it's not good and great mindset. This is an annoying waste of my time and my money.
Right.
But just if you could remove your personal self from it and just think about, okay, I got 23 years off of windows that weren't even installed correctly.
Right.
That's pretty awesome.
Right.
When we're talking about how, at least on this podcast, we're constantly mentioning how short the lifespan is for components of your home.
Right.
And modern building components are getting thinner and thinner and cheaper by the day.
Right. And this is an excellent example, I think, for what your podcast tries to do, for what a homeowner might think could be a fix. You come in and say, not so much. And, my hope was, hey, can a contractor pop those windows out? Obviously, the things on the side, what are they called, shims, jams, whatever, they're sliding down. Could just new ones be put in, pop windows back in. And that was my hope, But you had kind of said that's not really possible. So, a homeowner is going to hope that there's a fix.
Yeah.
It's going to be the most economical. And sometimes homeowners just don't have the right idea for what the fix is. And even me being in real estate and seeing tons and tons of inspection reports now, I think this is kind of rare, and I haven't seen this. But
personally, I've never seen this particular movement from a window personally. Mm-hmm. Most of the time it gets too tight to function. This is kind of the opposite, where it's like opening almost. Mm-hmm. You were filling the gap with like cut pieces of kitchen sponge to try to stop at least airflow and save you from literally air conditioning that golf course.
Right.
And then there's just, I think I kind of detailed it a lot as we started the podcast, but the fact that you have brick veneer siding is definitely just an added obstacle in terms of, well, we can't really go back with a crappy vinyl window that would be more budget friendly. So I had those quoted by, shout out to Melissa at Talbert's Lumber Supply, who's amazing. But then Melissa called me and was like, those pictures, I've got questions, this, that, and the third. And with enough back and forth, she was like, okay, well, we can't do the nailing fin on the vinyl. And I was like, vinyl? Why are you quoting me? They're not vinyl. Like, they're metal and wood. And she was like, oh, that's we're in a different world. That's Windcore. You got to talk to Stacy.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. We got to do what's right.
Yeah.
So she sent me a quote for the vinyl, and I didn't even send it to you yet because I was like, I don't have the labor numbers put together, and I'm 98% sure you're not interested in putting up a less quality window. And then doubly so, you have an HOA.
Exactly.
So that creates yet another boundary of obstacles of bureaucracy that we have to go around.
Right.
And I believe in this case, it's more the color that's the HOA's concern.
Yeah, I think it's more the color. But they're like you said, these homes are very well built. Not many people have had to replace their windows, but we are at the 22 year lifespan, so there's going to be a lot more. So
right,
if a HOA if they start out thinking they're going to be really picky, they're going to have to loosen that up just a tad.
Yeah,
because people are only going to spend so much. Not many people. From me, from our conversations, I've redone like 4 of the kitchens in the 6 houses that I've been in, and
I want to dive into those
money
later.
to spend. That's sexy money to spend. Windows, roof, that's not sexy money to spend.
It's very, very unsexy, actually.
And I know it's going to be good, and it's going to look good I know it's going to look good when it's finished. I know it's going to look good when I sell. But boy, how I would much rather put in that in a kitchen.
Yeah. I've said it in various forms on various episodes that the most important stuff in your home, you can't see any of it.
Right.
You can't see any of the important stuff.
Right.
The insulation keeps you warm and cool. Your air conditioner, your giant air handlers in a crawl space or an attic.
Space.
You don't go in there. Right. And if you tell me you do, you're lying. Like you're just lying. Nobody does. I barely go in my crawl space. I go in there more than most because I have to check on a house water filter.
Right.
But and also my crawl space, I don't have to crawl.
Right.
I can walk. So that makes it much easier. But it's terrible down there.
I don't crawl in a crawl space, but if I can walk in a crawl space, I'll go in.
Yeah,
gladly.
I was very, very fortunate.
But I don't.
That that's okay. Just a phone ringing. No big deal.
All right, let me turn that.
I was very fortunate when I bought my house that my crawl space is, and I'm 6'5". I can walk the whole crawl space. If it was finished, it would be a basement, and that has obviously led to a significant reduction in cost of services, because when my plumber has to go under the house because my house only had one water spigot on the far end away from the driveway, so I couldn't water plants or wash my truck or car, whatever. So I was like, hey, let's put one there, one by the back door while we're at it.
Right.
What's a couple
He's
of
not
water?
G.I. Joe crawling.
Exactly. So he's like, what's a couple water spigots cost? And he was like, well, materials is this. That's not negotiable. And then he literally wrote back, how bad's your crawl space? And I was like, actually, it's the best one you're ever going to work in. And he was like, oh, well, in that case, I need like $200.
Yeah.
And I was like, great. And then
got it made.
Yeah. Same thing with adding, this is actually hilarious. When I had to add the gas lines, because I had no gas in this house at all. I had it run from the street, and now I have water heater, stove, fireplace, and permanent outdoor grill all piped in. He needed a ladder in the crawl space. He needed a ladder in the crawl space to secure the hard black screw pipe for gas with the metal brackets to my floor joist. He needed a ladder to hold it, to get to the bottom of the floor joist.
I've done that. I've added gas to because of redoing a kitchen, and I've added gas and didn't have a crawl space like that. So
it's
my
more
HVAC
expensive
guy, to do that, it was over $1,000.
Yeah, it's much more expensive.
It is, but I wanted gas.
Crawl. Yeah. So I would like to perfectly segue, because we're talking about gas. As a realtor, my realtor, Stacy Sloan, has told me that she gets tons of people. She shows them a gas house, and they're terrified of gas. Is that an experience you've encountered?
I think that there's just been a lot recently that they're saying, what is it, list just even when it's off. I mean, and I'm not saying I agree with that, but there's just been people that have come out and said, hey, you're getting some harmful gases even when it's off. Um, I tell people, hey, I love gas stoves. I love to cook with gas. You know, I think it's great to have a vent. I mean, I think it makes sense to have a vent. I mean, I think it makes sense to have a vent even if you have an electric stove, you know. So I see more people want gas
What's
than
interesting
not
with
want
that is
gas.
in the state of North Carolina, there's no venting law. There's codes if you choose to do it about how it must be installed,
Mm,
but there's no like clear black and white rules that are like, hey, you're cooking here, you must vent.
I've had that come up just recently
Yeah.
on a transaction.
I had
And
it come up when a
it didn't
client
have one, and it was a center island. So they did.
wasn't this our first contact actually?
It may have been. It may have
Elon?
been. And yes,
Yeah,
yes.
because
And they
they
wanted
reached
to
out to
vent
me.
that down. Yeah.
Yeah, they reached out to me. They were gonna buy like some vent that was installed into the kitchen island,
Yes.
and that would kind of like pop up
Pop up
and
downdraft.
pull
Yep.
it down. And I was like, well, one, never seen that.
Mm-hmm.
Two, never heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
Three, that's freaking awesome.
Yep. Yep.
Four, anything can be done.
Yeah.
Like it's figure outable. I
Yeah.
mean, just because it's going down instead of up, it needs power. They both need power,
Yep.
and you need a spot for it.
Mhm.
So either we're cutting a cabinet for a wall or we're cutting countertop. But it was like, yeah, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
why not? And then instead of going up
Mm-hmm.
through a soffit, we're gonna go down the crawl and out a crawl space wall. I mean,
Yeah.
it can all be done.
Yeah.
And I think last I left it with them, they were ordering it,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, well, once you get it, I
Mhm.
can roll out there, take real life measurements,
Yep.
and we'll cut the countertop because I'm
Yep.
not cutting.
Right.
I'm not cutting your stone without the
Right.
actual piece.
Exactly.
It's not worth. My guy wouldn't even do it,
No.
even if I said I'll cover the bill. He
No.
would just say no.
No.
Let's get it. Let's measure it. Let's do it. Let's do it once. Do it right. But yeah, I'm now remembering that was really our first. You were like, hey, do you think you could handle this? And I was like, absolutely. And then they called me. I'm now remembering I was at a networking event, and they called me, and I had to like leave the networking event and be like, oh yeah, I remember. What's going on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you buying it?
Yeah. Nice folks.
Yeah, we haven't met,
Yeah.
but we had a very nice
nice
conversation. I was like, I can absolutely handle, no problem. Here's my license number. Give me a Google, all that. And we left it at, you should order it. And when you physically have it, in your garage,
Yeah.
I'll be there the next day.
By the way, you should mention what your parents do to her, because she's a vocal coach.
Oh, okay. I will definitely bring that up for sure. Yeah. Well, it kind of comes up naturally. Everybody asks me how I get into this, and I'm like, well, son of an architect and designer, and they build recording studios, and I grew up my entire life seeing construction around my house.
So cool.
Yeah. I mean, my parents have the house where I'm from in New York, and then 100 yards away, closer to the street, is their office. But it's like a legit building where, 10 employees drive to work every day. And that's the one on the street. So that's where the school bus would drop us off.
Oh, cool.
So every day at like 3:45, we'd get off a school bus and walk from the street, what was designed to look like a house. But you walk in and there's 10 employees. So we got off the school bus every day. Hey, Mom, she's still in the office. Hey, Pop, he's still in that office. Hey, name an employee times 10 and distract them, make them play Quake with us or Doom or whatever stupid computer games that would drive my dad nuts because we were taking space on his server. But I mean, that's, I grew up just not even knowing what actual architectural plans were, but knowing how to read them because I just they were around my entire life.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I remember one time somebody asked me, like, you can read plans. And I was like, no, I have no idea what they say. And my mom was like, yes, you do. You 100. What's that? I was like, oh, that's a door. She's like, what's that mean? I was like, oh, that's the measurement of the wall. She's like, see, you just didn't know that you knew. And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. You're immersed in it long enough.
Yeah.
That's
great.
Every summer from school, if I wasn't, the 1 week I wasn't at Boy Scout camp, which was like sleepaway camp up in the Adirondacks, for the most part, I was either playing tennis or I was just being paid by my pops to like work for him because there was, we lived on 30 acres. There was just so much to do all the time. And then compound that with my mother had a massive garden that always needed mulch brought in or a bed being rebuilt or something. And we had like a full-time gardener dude as well. And then compound that with, what are we building this summer? Are we rebuilding the pool? Are we adding a new deck? Are we extending the screen room? Like, my parents' bedroom got bigger one year. And so just always and forever, this guy named Fred Kimmelin. He was like, when you think of a stereotypical Marlboro Red smoking, Bud Heavy drinking, bearded, old school carpenter, that was him in a nutshell. He did, in fact, smoke and drink. And I watched him build all of these projects and helped him, from the beginning, to the point where I remember being so young that like I was too young to know even how to hold the hammer correctly. And I'd be hammering these nails so much that my arm would hurt that I would like just switch arms and just start using my left arm. And I remember specifically Fred looking at me like, you know how cool that is? Like, not everybody can do that. You might be ambidextrous. And I was like, I'm too young to know what you just said. I was like 10 years old. I was like, my arm just hurts, but cool. Switching arms. Yeah. So it just kind of, it's been in the blood, as they say.
That's good. That's good.
So back to your house, the window project. It definitely morphed almost immediately from hoping of a quick fix to, okay, let's swap with some vinyl windows, to once I started really talking to window people at Talbert's, they were like, that's not even really a good move. And I believe last week we had Stacy from Talbert's reach out, and he was like, I just didn't want to go there. Let me take some measurements so that, there's no issues. I can, the exact same. And I was like, perfect. That's what we really want. We want to make sure that they're as, plug and play, easy to swap in and out as quickly as possible so that there's no, real issues. And that, that's the move, especially with that brick facade being, there's not a whole lot of guesswork. I'm running into a similar job, a now repeat customer who wants me to replace all 3 of the exterior doors to the home. And the basement is, door height cinder block, not a lot of give. And both of the front and back door are, it's the same brick veneer style siding. So it's like, I looked at them and I was like, we only have, an inch and a quarter. And if you look at what you've got, they ripped down a 2x something to an inch and a quarter, and then they put 3/4 of an inch of caulking. Like, he's like, yeah, I see it. I was like, it's more or less what we're going to have to do. I mean, I can't put in a full anything without cutting brick. You don't want me to get a big demo saw and start ripping, 3/4 of an inch of brick all the way down a door. Like, that's going to look terrible, so it just, sometimes you have to just deal with what the situation is. There's not a whole lot you can do about it. So switching gears a little bit, how did you start out in the real estate business, and what were you doing before then?
So, well, interestingly, I think I'll go back even further. My first job, and I go back to this because I think it helps me. I think my past experiences have helped me with real estate and helped me kind of evolve to that. My first job out of college, I was a claims adjuster for an insurance company, and I worked for an insurance company that I was commercial, and so I got involved when people were injured. So if a truck driver, broadsided you, I was the one that was working and handled your claim for your broken neck. And or if you slipped and fell in a Kroger, I was the one, and I got involved in a little bit more catastrophic stuff, but it helped me learn to negotiate. It helped me learn to, I'm not from New York. I'm a North Carolinian. So, when you grow up in North Carolina, it's important to be nice. But that really helped me. That helped me to go toe to toe with people, and so that was a great job for me. It was a hell job, but it was a great job for me in my development. And then I became a paralegal, and I basically did the same thing, but worked for attorneys who helped people when they were injured, who liked my experience as a claims adjuster. So, and then I stayed at home. I had the ability to stay at home with my kids, and that was a great blessing to be able to do that. And I got into real estate because I loved houses. And I also hated something in the house that I lived in. And interestingly, a flood took place in that house when I was at the beach. Water line to ice maker and all that. So there was a flood, and come back, and the wood floors looked like ant roller coasters, and water in the basement, and just a nightmare. But that turned into thinking, okay, I'm going to fix this, but this is the time to do something here. And I hated that I had a laundry room between my kitchen and my family room and just a hall. So I thought, I need to get rid of this laundry room, and I need to open this up. So that was the beginning of my love of renovating and love of real estate and love of the two combined. And it's allowed me to kind of, fast forward, kind of have that vision. So I feel like as a realtor, I'm not a construction person, but I feel like I've got some vision about, hey, this would be a good thing to do here. Hey, we've got a kitchen cabinet here. It would be great to take this down, have this whole opened up with an archway. This would really give an open floor plan. Sure, that house got into it, realized there were 12 plumbing pipes in there when we got in there. So, but sometimes things just evolve into a little bit more, but it still worked out great.
So how'd you find when you were in that house, the flood happens and you're like, okay, great. I wanted to do anything anyway. How do you just said you're not a construction person. So how do you go about finding the people to do the work?
Personal referrals. That's what it's all about. That house was in the Hope Valley Country Club area. So there were a lot of people who had done renovations on their homes. I got a recommendation from a friend, contacted them. I liked them. They had great references. So I ended up working with them, and it was a very good process and a good result. And this is too where I feel like I have some expertise is, that neighborhood, I could not price myself out of that neighborhood. There are homes in that neighborhood, $3.5–4 million homes. So there was no limit to what I was going to get my money out of that house and that return on investment was going to be just about guaranteed. Unless I made some really stupid, ugly decisions, it was going to pay off, and it did. It paid off greatly. Not every house and not every neighborhood offers that situation. There's some neighborhoods, if you buy a house and you want to renovate and put $50,000–100,000 in a kitchen, you might not get it back because the comps might not support that.
It's every rental house I own.
So
literally.
So, and depending on how long you're going to hold on to them, if you're going to hold on to them for a long time, you might get it out. But yeah.
Oh, I mean, obviously that's the plan. But
Okay. There you go.
when we redid the first couple of houses, we just were like, okay, we're obviously on a budget, but there's being on a budget, and then there's being really good contractor partnered with a world-class designer and a world-class architect, and we all look at each other and go, are we really about to put the crappiest Formica countertop in this kitchen that we bled for? I literally bled for, because like you got to cut your hand at least once on every project. And my mother redesigned 5 times to get it just right, and we're all looking at each other like, no, we're not. We're gonna put a real countertop. This is why were we even discussing it?
Right.
And you make that decision, 18 different small things in a home, all of a sudden you're not in the let's resell this and make money. All of a sudden you're in the this neighborhood is too cheap for our price point, because we bought the shittiest home on a ghetto street and made it the nicest home still on a ghetto street. And until 5 years goes by and 8 other people do what we did, and it's no longer the nicest home because all the homes have been elevated,
right,
we're not going to make it.
Right.
So that's exactly what we've done. We've been building ready to sell homes for a price point that is not there yet. Well, actually now it is there, and we're still just holding them because they're profitable. But 10 years ago when we did our first one, we really looked at each other like we screwed up. You're like, oh no, we have now $140,000 house that won't sell for more than $95,000.
Right.
And we went, okay, well, we're not going to take that hit. Let's rent it.
Right.
And then we're like, oh, well, there's another $40,000 house around the corner that we now know exactly how to gut and redo. Let's do it again.
Right.
And sure enough, try to cut the budget more, one by one. Don't, and sure enough, go, well, we spent too much on this. Let's rent it out. 10 houses later, here we are.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're going to hold on to those houses for a while, and obviously you're getting passive income from that, great.
Yeah, I mean, the company, it's, for in tax reasons, we don't make any money because we had to pay to do everything. But that's good, though, for taxes.
Right.
And then also, there will be a moment. It's not that close, but it's not a lifetime away. It's not like my grandkids have to wait to see this. Like, I will very much enjoy a life where these houses will most likely, knock on wood, fingers crossed, sell for the point where, my partners and I, who are all family, can retire, for lack of a better. I mean, that would be the dream,
Right.
But
I'm a true example that real estate is the way to develop wealth. I mean, that is the way to develop wealth.
I've had financial people on here who say it's truly the only way to develop generational wealth for your family.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm an example of that just in the number of the homes that I've owned and sold. And now, granted, I've bought them to live in them, but I've transformed them somewhat, some more than others.
Just because you've been living in them doesn't, that doesn't negate the concept that you're using. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
My mother sorry to cut you off. My mother had a friend who did that. That was her life. That was how she made money. She would buy a house. She'd move her and her son into it, and she would go to town. She would work on it all the time. My mom would help her. I'd go and help her. As a kid, I'm just being tagged along with my mom. Shout out to Mary Ann. I hope you're a subscriber and a listener. And we could do a Zoom podcast to even talk about this. I can't believe I didn't think to reach out to her. But that's what she did for a living. I actually didn't know what she did for a living for a really long time. And my mom was like, you notice how every time we go to Jacques' house, her son Jacques, it's a different house. And I was like, oh, yeah. She's like, that's what she does. She buys a house. She does the minor things she has to do, flips it for whatever the profit. I didn't know any of the numbers. I don't know any of them now, but that's what she did. And I don't know if she was, cover of a New York City real estate magazine famous, but she paid the bills. She
Right.
sent her kid to a private school.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it's like
Right.
there's levels of success. And if she
Absolutely.
had a nice life and continues to have a nice life, great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's kind of what I did. I'd be in a house, and I'd transform it. The one in the Hope Valley Country Club neighborhood, I transformed that. Fortunately, I sold it. I rode that wave. Sold it before 2008, and I right at the height.
You made out like a bandit, probably.
I did. And
More.
it was because of what I did to it.
I was about to ask, like, everybody made out well, but you did something cool.
I did something that made it look fantastic.
So let's dive in a bit, because you mentioned that the laundry room was really just kind of in the middle of everything. Didn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't know what the house looked like, but I'm envisioning what you're describing in my head, and I'm like, yeah, get that out of there.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing for anybody else who has a similar thing is, if you're not going to blow out some walls, and by walls I mean exterior walls,
Mm-hmm.
and expand your physical footprint and add square footage, your biggest question is, where do I put them? Where do we move the physical washer and dryer?
Right.
Now, I'm about to ask you what you did, but for those who are listening and are like, oh, I kind of am thinking of this too, think about where pipes are for your ease, okay? So, for example, if you have a very large closet that you're not using all of it, and it happens to be on the other side of a wall of a bathroom, ding, there it is, okay? Try to see where the water is. You have to get water to the washer. That's not even the hard part.
So I moved them upstairs in a closet, and that closet, the side of the wall, backed up to a bathroom.
And
backed up to like a toilet and a shower.
Now,
so it was perfect.
The reason why that's so even more important than getting the water there is getting the water out. Exactly.
Yes.
You already know this, but I'm kind of going, for lack of a better term, mansplaining for listeners.
Yes.
The washer, takes in hot and cold. Guess what? Those wires are run under pressure. And translation, that means they can go up, down, left, right. It doesn't matter. Your toilet, your drains and your sinks and your showers and your tubs and your washing machine, they're run gravitationally, which means the pipe has to be tilted a certain way before it runs into the next pipe that has to be tilted a certain way, all gravitationally flowing to wherever it exits your house. This is super crucial, because if you have to go against gravity, you have to pay a tremendously large amount of money to install a grinder pump, which is just a fancy way of pumping the drained water and or sewage, because this is done in sewage situations, up to a point where then it ties into the pipes that are gravitationally fed. Pumps cost money, and they take up space. For some people, money is not an object, but the space is square footage. It all adds up. So you had a little bit of a luck where you're like, I've got this closet. It backs up to a bathroom that's, you've got your space, your square footage taken care of, and more importantly, your plumbing. Getting the hot and cold pressurized lines, that could go from anywhere, but the drain, more importantly, and adding an outlet is not terribly hard.
And turned them into stackables. Right.
And the getting slightly more difficult would be running the 220 for the dryer, but still not like the end. This is not the end of the world. Once you could figure out the drainage part of the dishwasher, I misspoke, of the washing machine, everything else is easier by comparison.
It worked out great.
Yeah. Did you vent it through the roof for the dryer?
I'm trying to think. This was a while ago. I bet so. I bet so, because I didn't have a third floor, so
or maybe out to the soffit on the side or something like that.
No, I think it was probably to the roof.
Just a little pipe butt.
This was closer to the front of the house, so so I was very, very fortunate that those things aligned. To make it not as difficult, and had a basement, but I didn't want to do that, just because who wants to carry their laundry from their basement up to 2 flights of steps. So it worked out well.
Absolutely.
Put it on the floor where most of the living is.
Yeah, if I was, so I have a foot problem So my home that I'm designing is one level.
Mm-hmm.
So walking a couple extra feet to a laundry room does not bother me at all.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was with my said foot, life takes people wherever they take them. And in this hypothetical moment, I was wherever and living in designing a 3-story something. I would absolutely want my washer and dryer in my master closet,
Mm-hmm.
just moving the least amount of room, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to dump that on the bed and fold it and just put it right back in the closet. But life takes people different ways, different directions. I'm fortunate that I am even in the position where I can be designing my own home and thinking about
how it works
my
for you.
handicap, for
Right.
lack of I try not to use that word because it makes me feel bad, but
But
I have
works
it.
for you.
Yeah.
What
And I'm
works for you.
thinking about aging in place,
Right.
which most 30-ish-year-old people don't think about, but I'm thinking about it.
Right.
So I have that ability, but sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, you said you stacked them.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Right. Takes up even less room.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's perfect.
So the laundry room that existed, the original,
Mm-hmm.
was it just like similar to mine, just 2 doors and left and right with a shelf above it? Or
No,
was it like
was
a
bigger.
big room?
It was a little bigger.
Okay. So
yeah.
was it also the pantry?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
It was just a laundry room,
Shop
and like
sink?
a little storage closet
Okay.
in the back of it.
Shop sink?
No.
Okay.
It didn't have. Wait.
Did you?
It did. It did.
So you just nixed that?
Just nixed that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, just nixed it all, opened it all up. So
And did you find? I want to ask this question, and I want you to think about it from 2 perspectives.
okay.
The storage that you vanished,
Mm-hmm.
did you miss it personally? Do you think whoever bought it missed it? Obviously, you sold the house for a tremendous amount of money. So from an overall perspective, this was a win. But I'm just trying to really dive into it because I'm one of those people who is like, everything has to be in its spot.
Right.
I love a spot for everything.
Right.
I love storage. But I'm also one of those people who, like, I stacked my washer and dryer, built a permanent shelf system, and now I have 2 empty closets because I don't have that much stuff. But I'm also on a family of 4,
Right.
or however many people are,
So
I got 1 dog, and we're blessed with his presence,
Right.
Willie Bear in the studio. Yes.
So I did probably miss that, but I had to just come up with a new system for what I did with those clothes that were in there. Sometimes I'd use it, for drying things, but I just kind of came up with a new system.
So it wasn't like the room you put your Costco haul in that you then
No.
were like, oh, where do I put the paper towels?
No.
Okay.
No. But I think any change like that, you're weighing, is it worth it aesthetically and financially? Because
you couldn't be more
a
right.
huge financial benefit to make that change, to deal with, okay, now how do I solve, what I had there, which could have been like a little drop my laundry basket, leave it in there, close the door. I didn't have that, but that's okay. What I did have, once I opened that up, I was looking at, it was just fabulous to have it all over the open space.
So was it just pure, beautiful, open, could have had a dance party, or did you build an island, or?
I didn't build an island. I actually brought in a old large old antique piece that was had some really pretty detail to it, and then I had a top put on it and made it into the kitchen island, and it just added some nice character.
And just to clarify, attached and was sold with the house, or you took it?
Yes, it was attached. It wasn't attached, but I sold it with the house.
Okay. Just to clarify.
It looked that great. Somebody would have wanted it. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, because we sold a house where when we rented the house and sold the house, we bought, supplied, and left a not attached IKEA kitchen island.
Yeah.
That had like a butcher block top,
Right.
and 3 nice stainless steel shelves, and you could do bar stools on one side.
Right.
And we were just like, no, this $300 thing is part of the house. Like this
Right.
is this. It was almost like if you took the island, it was false advertising.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But that leads to an interesting segue about what you have to leave and what you don't have to leave.
Right.
And maybe as a realtor, you can help educate me.
Right.
Because I was told, possibly incorrectly, and was under the impression that if it was screwed into the wall, you had to leave it. Like the TV mount, but not the TV. Like you could take the TV, but you had to leave the mount.
Correct.
Or the rods for curtains.
Correct. And I mean, the thinking behind it is, okay, if you take your curtain rods off and you take your TV mount off, you're creating an ugly thing that buyer has to fix. And that buyer might not want their TV there. They may not want those. They're going to need to, get somebody to fill those holes. They're going to need to paint. So it just creates a problem. So one thing that I've told my clients is, take your house, turn it upside down and shake it. Anything that sticks, that stays.
So
anything that sticks to the walls, that kind of thing, that stays. But they've also extended that to like bathroom mirrors that even hang on a wire. So you need to be very clear. You need to, as a realtor, I'm very clear with my clients. Do you want this bathroom mirror that's hanging on a wire? If so, we need to put it in that offer to purchase, because that person may think they can take it because it's just hanging on a wire. And, so they're just some things.
What's the law, though?
The law?
Your attention to detail is appreciated, and it's probably going to be part of your answer of why people should hire you versus someone else when I ask you that in a couple of minutes.
Very detailed.
Which is incredible, both in life and in this particular line of work. But, like, for example, let's just use this room, for example, right? There are a number of pictures and items that are hard screwed into the wall.
Yep.
Now, when I sell this house, if the buyer thinks he's getting my web camera, he's obviously that's not happening, but it's just as hard screwed into the wall as that curtain rod is.
So what you need to do is there is a place in the offer to the listing agreement that you say that you're not gonna, that's not to convey, and the agent needs to make that clear.
So it's on me, the seller, to be like, the curtain rods are staying, but I'm taking my TV.
Yeah, that conversation needs to be said. If
Okay.
you want to take something, you let the agent know, and then it's the agent's job to let the public know that that camera is not staying. It is going, if you can leave the mount for them or whatever, or if you want to take the mount, fix the wall. That's normally what happens. If you want to take the whole kit and caboodle, fix the wall.
Okay, so hypothetically, I have a very big, heavy, because it's 10 years old, 65-inch TV on a big mount screwed to the wall.
Yeah.
So you're saying that I would have to say from day one, when I sell this house, the TV and mount are coming off, and I will acknowledge that, upon closing or whatever the timing is, I will, once everything's signed and whatever, I will remove it and patch those holes.
Exactly.
Or I am acknowledging that it is staying.
Or leave the mount.
Or just the mount and take the TV.
But the problem is sometimes people forget and they keep the screws on the TV.
Yeah, I mean,
so
most of the time the mounts
stuck
and
with
TV
the mount
should
with
stay
no
together.
Screws.
Yeah.
I love it when I see people when they've moved out and they've left the screws, that they've been thoughtful of that.
My thought was it would just be way easier to just go buy a same size but much cheaper TV. Just take my nice TV down, put the old TV up, and go, TV's part of the house, included in the listing. you get a nice big TV in the
Right.
only spot it should go. Granted, I have a house where the TV clearly should only go one spot. That's not the case with everybody. So,
Right.
so what is the actual black and white letter of the law that is, say, arguable in court if we got there?
I mean, the word is it attached? So
Okay.
attached is a big word when it comes to that.
So
As to
that
whether or
picture of my grandfather is not attached, but the screw is attached to the wall anchor. So I've got to take the picture, but by law I have to leave the screw in the anchor hole.
I think it's okay in that regard to take your picture hanger thing, and if you just leave a hole, I don't think that's. But when you're talking about a TV mount or things that are heavier that could make a difference, that's where. But where that's the letter of the law would say, leave the TV mount, take the TV.
Okay.
That's where it comes down to.
Because I know I'm very familiar with the law as from renter perspective.
Now, is this bookcase mounted to the wall?
No, it's just sitting there, gravity.
Okay, well then you would take it. But a lot of people do shelves in their garage.
Yeah.
And they're mounted.
Mhm.
And so those would stay.
Yeah, like I have workbenches and stuff. It's all attached and
that
screwed.
should
I
stay.
would before I know that like there's one I'm going to take down before the listing because I
Right.
don't want any. But then there's another one where I'm like that just
Right.
stays. It's built in.
Right.
And,
That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Get it out before the pictures are taken.
right.
Get it out.
Yeah.
And fix the wall if if it's
Yeah.
going to leave a bit.
Yeah. See, for renting, it's much easier because I kind of copied what my apartment complex was doing. And then somewhere along the way, I forgot it wasn't required, and I just assumed it was the law. So what we do, my apartment complex had this rule: if there's a hole in the wall smaller than a quarter, we don't care, because people are going to tack nails, all kinds of stuff to hang pictures. And for those who don't know, the lags that are going into the studs for your TV mount, they're not that thick. The mount is a big piece of metal, but when you pop it off, you should have between 4 and 6 smaller than a quarter size holes. So anybody who's worried about their apartment complex caring whether you mount your TV, they don't care. Just don't don't put a fist through the wall. They're going to dock you for that.
Right.
Because anything quarter or smaller, you don't need a specialty drywall crew. For those who are listening, any painter has the ability to put a little
mud,
a little caulk, whatever it might be, if we're quarter or smaller.
Yeah.
So I just kind of said the same thing to all of my renters. I was like, look, the walls are yours. Don't be one of those people who won't hang pictures. I want you to feel like your house is lived in. Secondly, I repaint between tenants, which I found out is actually not the law, but I've been doing it because I thought it was the law. Because I was like, well, you got to clean. I figured you just had to clean and paint. Boom, just make it new. And obviously, like I just said, especially if I'm bringing in, shout out to Felix Guzman, if I'm bringing Felix in there, he's patching it. He doesn't know how to not do it, especially when I tell him, make it perfect.
Right.
And then to avoid unnecessary holes, I mount the TVs for my tenants for free.
That's nice.
You move in, you got 2 TVs, hand me the TVs, hand me the mounts, tell me where, I'll find the stud. I do it in 5 minutes, no unnecessary holes. Same with blinds.
Great.
You want blinds, you want something put up, you're not really sure how to do it, just call me. I'm not going to charge you for that. I'd rather it be done once, right, no unnecessary holes.
Yeah.
And I'll use a better screw, a better drywall anchor, just like overall. I'd just much rather, like, we're not,
Yeah.
But that's also, not to toot our own horn, but that's the benefit of renting from me and not some corporation where you've got to put in a service request with someone you don't know, and some maintenance guy you've never seen shows up at a time you're unaware. Whereas like, you just text me and I'll be like, I'll be there tomorrow.
Right. I'm a firm believer of do it right.
Yeah.
Do it right, or just don't.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Do it right.
Circling back, full circle. I know we get tangents, but it's our podcast. We can do whatever we want. Circling back to the laundry room project, the first of, I think you said you did 4 or 6 nice big projects. To me, sounds like your biggest problem after you're relocating is there's a lot of plumbing in the walls you're trying to get rid of.
Yeah. Yeah. So they did such a good job of kind of handling all the details. And this was my first, and the one where I just kind of said, take it and run with it. And they did, I mean, my kitchen was to the studs, and, I mean, it was a war zone looking for a while, but paid off. So, but yeah, I mean, they just handled all those details, and I'm not a contractor. I don't wear your hat, and I certainly don't try to. But they did everything and did it great. The kitchen that I did think it was going to be something small, taking out one cabinet. That was when we found 12 plumbing pipes, 12
Okay, let's jump into that one
12
then.
small little white plumbing pipes running up. Well, they had to be, they had to be replaced and
So
rehomed.
so give me a bigger scope of this project. So this is different than the laundry project.
Yes,
This is
it's
a
different
house.
house.
Okay.
Different house.
So okay, we're different house. What's the problem that you're trying to solve?
I wanted to open it up. Wanted
Okay.
to just make it look more of an open floor plan, and I knew I wanted to do, make the cabinets look better, put in quartz, put in a nicer sink, put in a great faucet. I wanted the kitchen to look more current and modern. But I did also want to open up get a more open feel. And so
So some cabinets were in the way.
yeah, some
Okay.
cabinets were in the way. Not a lot. I mean, it was just mainly one cabinet that was vertical, but all the way to the floor.
Right, and popping a cabinet off is very easy.
It was very easy,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Then you open the drywall.
Yeah, finding a home for rerouting that plumbing.
So all of those, you said small white water pipes. So those are pressurized lines. Those are like the hot and cold going to your upstairs bathroom
From the
or
crawl space
Yep.
to upstairs.
Yeah.
So they were, yeah. So they had to be rerouted. And so, started out being maybe that started out being I don't remember what dollar amount, but that dollar amount changed.
I'm sure.
When those needed to be rerouted.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're,
and it was like, do we want to proceed, Margaret, or do we want to just forget it?
I mean,
and put this back.
That's a legitimate question.
It is a
because
big question.
when you're, if I'm the contractor and I see that, I'm going to go, whoa.
Well, you never know what you're going to find
You
till
never
you get
know
in there.
till you open the wall. So I'm gonna call Tom, my plumber, and I'm gonna go, hey man,
Yeah.
we were expecting to see an empty stud cavity
Yeah.
and have this demoed today, and now we're doing a full stop, and you got to tell me what do we do?
Exactly. So he got his plumber in there. He said, Margaret, this is where we are. This is what how do you want to proceed?
Yeah.
And I was like, give me numbers. Let me sit it with it. Get me numbers. Get me some concrete numbers, and then I'll let you know. And he got me some concrete numbers, and I was like, okay, let's do it.
Okay. So you relocated them. Do you remember exactly how you kind of did that?
Yes, I do remember. It wasn't. They were able to. I believe they were able to just not come up where they came up from the crawl space. They were in the crawl space able to make them come up in a different place, but it wasn't that far away, and then run up a wall that already had drywall. And then they did kind of have to come over in that flooring. So they kind of had to do a little backward C.
Okay. Minimal
to get
openings.
to where instead of going straight up, they kind of had to do a little backward C to go but it worked out fine.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
it wasn't, the distance wasn't so great, which was a blessing that it wasn't.
So how did that project turn out overall?
Turned out great.
And did
turned
that
out
house
great.
sell for?
It did.
You got that money
was
back?
another one that was a huge windfall for what I did. But I did also that one was riding that pandemic appreciation wave too.
Okay, so you've had a lot of combos of, not implying that what you did was not the reason, but you've definitely had combos of, I did some great stuff,
I did.
but I did great timing.
Great timing. So yes, timing can be a big part of it. But also two of my renos did benefit from timing. One of them, the housing height before it crashed, and the other pandemic. But I did also buy a house that had some pretty significant problems, and I worked on that house, but it was in a great location. Worked on it, upgraded it in a number of ways, and had great appreciation on that.
Well, let's talk about that one.
I think that location is an important factor when you're kind of factoring in what are you going to do to a house, just like we touched on earlier. That house was in a good location, and I knew resale was going to be good.
So what's the location we're talking about now for this third one?
That one was in Durham, kind of near Trinity School of Durham and Chapel Hill, kind of near Garrett Farms.
Yeah. I'm
right,
ish. I got
right
you.
in there.
Yeah. Okay. So you said that was a longer laundry list, so to speak, of upgrades. Mm-hmm. What kind of things did you do to that one?
Did flooring throughout, did master bath, did kitchen.
When you say master bath, we're doing gut to studs redo?
Mm-hmm. Pretty much, yeah. Yep.
Okay, so you did a full bath, a full kitchen, floors,
kitchen.
I'm assuming paint.
Mm-hmm.
Did you expand the square footage at all?
I did not expand the square footage, but it had a sunroom that wasn't heated or cooled, so I put a split system in there.
Did you insulate it?
I did.
Okay.
So it was then able to, it was already insulated, but the windows weren't the type of windows that were going to be the best. But a split system did great in there, and it made it heated square footage, so I was able to count that.
Okay, so you kind of added square footage.
Kind of.
Yeah, quasi.
Yeah. Not structurally, but I made it heated.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So it counted.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've done that for 2 clients who we finished their attics that were not square footage, and now they are.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but those were
And you've looked at another client of mine who wants to do that.
Yeah.
Possibly to her attic.
Yeah, in fact, I'm hopefully seeing her today, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a particularly fun project because every attic is different. Mm-hmm. And then they all seem to be going in a similar direction. Everybody thinks that you can just add a duct to your air conditioning and it will do more space. And everybody's wrong. That's not how air conditioners work. They're sized for your specific square footage and your insulation, your existing insulation. So when you want to add an entire attic's worth of square footage, the option is replace your entire system, which is very expensive, mm-hmm. or do what you just said, put in a mini split, which for those who don't know, it's that big square or it's big rectangular, not too tall, but very long white unit that usually is screwed to a wall, vent right in front of it, and it has its own remote. And
they're extremely efficient.
The efficiency is amazing, but they have their own remote and their own thermostat, and basically you now have separately controlled rooms.
Interesting when you're talking about that. I was helping a client who wanted to purchase a townhome in Chapel Hill that was 3 stories. It's an old building, and it's an old subdivision, but everybody loves it because you feel like you're living in the woods. Your views are just very wooded, but someone there, I think, just decided they were gonna just AC that house to the max. And they had an AC unit that was probably 8-foot square unit.
That's like a commercial unit.
I looked at that thing and I was like, that's a freaking monster. And then we noticed some condensation in the basement coming down from the ceiling. And that was, as a realtor, you don't start out learning everything in one shebang. You learn every day. And that was a very good example to me of something I learned every day. I looked at that unit and I knew that thing's too big.
Yeah.
I mean, that thing's too big. And then we saw evidence dripping some pipes, and they had cut some drywall in the ceiling because the pipes were dripping. And I told my client, I'm like, I'm a little concerned about this.
I've heard this story from my HVAC guy, who that's the guy, literally. And, because the first client to do an attic project went phenomenal. Chris, in fact, even was a guest on the podcast. But he was told by his builder incorrectly that everything was ready in the attic. And by that, he meant all of the rough-in was done. And he was not totally wrong. When you went up there, there were pipes for plumbing. There was obviously bare minimum lighting, but not outlets to code. The plumbing needed to be adjusted a little bit, and he was told, again, incorrectly, that his air conditioner was just big enough to handle the space.
Oh, goodness.
Right. And so I relayed that information to my HVAC guy before we were in front of the client. And I mean, he just laughed. He was like, that's not how that works. Like, if that's the case, then this house has so much mold hidden behind the drywall because of said condensation issue.
Right.
And I was like, well, I don't think that's the case. This home looks really, really nice. It doesn't smell bad, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, well, then there's no way the system is just a half ton bigger or a whole ton bigger.
Right.
Hoping that they would do this.
Right.
Like, it's just not how that works. And I didn't know that either. I was like, oh, you size it a half ton bigger in case. No. Size it correctly. Deal with it at the, Right. So that was one of those examples where we actually put 2 mini splits because we divided a very large attic into a playroom, a guest room with a bathroom.
Right.
And so the bedroom and the playroom had matching mini splits on each wall with their own remotes, so you could even do different temperatures in there.
Right.
But man, when we spray foamed that thing, I mean, it was night and day.
Yeah.
And his current system is now much happier,
right,
because it's in a spray foamed utility room rather than a humid attic, so
right,
it's working a little less hard.
Right.
So just overall, it was a better project. But that seems to be a very, very common just lie. That is just told.
And misconception, too.
Well, it's a lie when the builder, who knows that's not how it works, tells the client that it's ready to rock.
Definitely.
Like, that's just a lie.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now, the next person I did that for wasn't told that by the homeowner. They were just told, and I quote, I've got the same builder, it was 5 houses away from Chris's house. Who was like, oh, Chris, I see you did your attic. Who did it? Here's Corbett's number, and I went and priced his attic, and it was the same thing. He was like, yeah, my unit's picking up, blah, blah, and I was like, no, not how this works. Just like, I can tell you right now, it's going to be the same, like 8 G's that we did the HVAC over there, but it's different than plumbing. Mm-hmm. You could just stub those pipes up with caps, call it a day, mm-hmm, or even electrical. You can run outlets and lights and not use them, and it's not a problem at all. Mm-hmm. And then one day flick a breaker and they're good to go. Mm-hmm. It's very, very different than HVAC.
Very different.
Yeah, because that condensation, that's one of those things that actually is really dangerous, because that condensation leads to real mold.
Real mold, yeah.
Real stuff.
Yep.
And by the time you notice it, it's usually too late.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially with systems in the floor.
Right.
Because gravity forces the drips downward. So you don't notice stuff in the crawl space because you never go in there.
interestingly, this owner, that seller, was a math professor.
Mm.
You would have thought he would have
run some numbers.
You would have thought he would have listened to his HVAC expert that said, no, you don't want to do that. You need the proper size.
Yeah.
I mean, it just blew my mind.
The only thing that I could think of, because I'm not sure how it was not caught by various inspectors, the only thing that I could think of is that maybe he had his air conditioning company size him and price him for a lower R value.
Mm-hmm.
And then after it was sized of this massive air conditioner, he maybe went back in with a higher R value or even spray foam and then didn't bring it back down the air conditioner.
Well,
it's the only thing I can think of.
It's puzzling because don't those have to be permitted as well?
Absolutely, 100%, and inspected.
So
if you're doing a new construction, the permits and
this isn't new construction. This is just, but it was this townhome building was built in the 70s, so this is an old complex. So, I see mechanical permits because I check for permits for my clients when they're doing things, when they're, if they're buying a house and I can tell it's been renovated. I'm looking for permits and I'm, doing all that. So a lot of times I'll see a mechanical permit for, an HVAC replacement.
Was there one in this case?
I didn't do that because we
walked away.
We walked away before that.
Fair enough.
And
so you don't bother with that research till there's more interest.
We know,
Okay, that makes sense. Otherwise, you'd be doing I feel like way more work.
Yeah.
For houses you're never gonna.
We ruled that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, not that I want you to do more work and dive in, but I am just curious, because if there was a recent replacement, obviously the 70s insulation is 70s insulation. It's probably newspaper. It was terrible. I don't even know if we had building codes back then. I was born in the 90s. I have no idea. I do know if there was a code, it's changed, and because it upgrades like every year.
Right.
But either way, HVAC, people do stuff without a permit all the time, whether it's right or wrong. It is wrong for the record, but especially replacing an entire HVAC system. But in theory, it should have been permitted. Mm-hmm. And in theory, an HVAC professional should have sized it based on the square footage and best information they have with either an air duct test or just, there's a very intelligent HVAC computer calculations that I don't know how to use, but that's how they do it.
Right.
I'm doing it. Technically, it's not new construction because I'm buying a building and I'm ripping it to the studs. But from my trades perspective, it's new construction because there's no existing anything. We rip it all out. So my HVAC guy comes into a freshly framed house and has to start over. So for him, it's new construction. So he goes, hey, give me the information on the windows. And I go, here are the new windows we're buying with 17 numbers that are irrelevant to me because he just needs them for energy calculations. Mm-hmm. And then he'll ask me a very important question. What are we doing for insulation? And I'll go, we're spray foaming. And he goes, great. Click, 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 because that makes the package infinitely smaller. Now, for those who are doing both, and by both I mean insulation and HVAC, always spray foam. The spray foam costs way more, but it's the same amount of money. And what I mean by that is, let's say insulation and HVAC cost $20,000. Okay. You can spend $5,000 on shitty insulation and $15,000 on an amazing HVAC system, or 10 and 10, or 5 and 15 the other way. But it's the same $20,000. But at the end of the day, you will have a better quality of life by having a better sealed home with spray foam insulation.
Okay.
So if you're ever doing both, don't be baffled by how expensive the spray foam is because your HVAC just got cheaper, but it's the same money.
Okay.
So for listeners, I can't stress that enough because spray foam's really, really expensive. It's super expensive and it doesn't seem worth it, but it is. It's so much more worth it. It really is a night and day situation in terms of air gaps, bug sealant, just everything.
Okay.
Yeah. But in this case, a 70s home that wasn't gutted, you can't even see the insulation. So who knows? Maybe that owner was just like, this insulation's terrible. I want more AC, and just told the guy, oh, it's a 3-ton. And he said, no, I don't care. Give me a 5-ton.
This is a 3-story townhome.
Right. All on one unit.
Yes.
Right. Which is not really done nowadays also.
Right.
Nowadays, those are, I'm not even saying mini splits, but nowadays,
right.
Level by level might have its own thermostat, and there might be 3 air conditioners in a row outside doing separate levels. They don't really have one.
Right.
That makes it work so much harder when it wants to power the furthest floor away.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then also just for you living there makes like you set one thermostat at 70 and it's not going to be 70 in the whole house.
Right.
Yeah. So. Okay, so moving on to, I guess we're on number 4 of one of your renovation projects. What was the next one?
Okay. Let's see. Well, we skipped. Okay, we did.
In any order.
Okay.
We did the kitchen, then we did the laundry room, and now we're on, and we did that like whole house with the laundry list of cosmetic stuff and bathroom and kitchen.
Yeah. So one of the things that I really enjoyed doing is, there's so many houses that will have like the microwave over the range.
Yeah, like mine.
And I like to take that out and build a wood hood.
Okay.
And so I've had the same contractor that did that house that I had gutted the kitchen and took out the laundry room. I've had him do wood hoods for me and 2 other homes.
Where do you put the microwave?
Usually in a place on the counter that isn't as visible. So
so you'll trash the wall hanging one. You'll get a cuter, smaller one, and it'll just be an appliance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that is a personal choice?
Aesthetics are very important to me, and I think that also, you got to think about real estate pictures too. That makes a big impact when you've got a nice looking wood hood. And that's not something that is hugely expensive to do.
No, not really.
And I mean, a microwave, granted, you need your, I have a vent usually put in under my wood hood. And so, I'm buying the vent, and the hood is, covering that vent, and it's vented out. And usually it's a better vent, too, than what you get under your microwave, And so,
a lot of people don't care.
Right. A lot of people don't care, but aesthetics are very important to me. And also because I am a realtor, pictures of kitchens are very important. So when you've got a wood hood, that just elevates your kitchen look big time. And that's not a huge thing to do. And who cares if your microwave is, granted, if your kitchen's teeny tiny and you don't have a place to put it, but if you've got a place to put it, who cares if it's on the counter? That's going to make your kitchen look freaking great.
Yeah, like I said, it's some people don't care for sure. I'm an example of one of those people who's like, you better have the microwave above the range. Don't take my countertop space. But that's me.
Right, exactly.
Everybody's unique. I will say, custom wood hood is gonna be, what's the word? Like a focal point.
Exactly.
It's gonna catch your eye.
And
it's gonna be something that's not the norm, which is cool.
Yeah.
And then also,
painted wood hood.
I assumed, either
very decoratively.
Yeah, either
aesthetically
white
done.
Trim paint or matching the cabinet, but either way, or the wall color. But either way, looking great. I've seen plenty of people who will do like the metal ones.
Right.
You can buy tons of those. My buddy Jeremy did that.
Right, I did that in one.
Yeah.
And instead of doing a wood one, and the last home I sold, with that renovation where we found those pipes in that between the studs where we took that cabinet down, I decided, okay, I'm going to do a metal one here, and I wanted to make it a little more modern.
Yeah.
And so, Yeah, I think things like that. I love a hood that's kind of a focal point.
I think it has become more of the modern to
It,
do
I agree.
the metal ones. They come now with, you know, almost invisible LED lights and stuff, and it's just
Yeah.
it's like it's basically a one stop shop. You
Right.
basically hook up the duct and plug it in,
Right.
um, and there's so many cool styles to them.
They do.
They've
They
really
do.
changed it up. Yeah.
And I think people are kind of leaning toward modern looking things looking a little more modern.
Yeah,
as
that
opposed to
black
the
stainless seems to be
traditional.
taken over like hotcakes.
So yeah, so that's kind of been my. I mean, I'll enjoy having a gas stove. So when I do kitchens, I try to do gas, um, and but I do kind of like a focal point too.
Do you
And
leave the electric for future buyers?
no,
Okay.
no,
I was
usually have that
I
hauled
did
off.
that on purpose.
I usually have that hauled off just because I don't have a place where it would
Oh,
go.
sorry, you misinterpret. I
Oh,
don't mean the old range. I mean the
oh,
plug in
the
the wall.
plug. So usually, yeah, I think that has been left.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that has been left.
I did that because my again, Stacy, my realtor, she's like a lot of people, they'll
Hmm.
think the house is an 11 out of 10 and then you tell them it's gas heat and they're afraid of like explosions. And they're
Right,
like we just won't do it. And I'm like,
right.
"Okay,
I have had a
cool.
client like that.
Yeah."
I don't have many like that,
No, I don't imagine there's many like that. I mean,
but
if there were, the problem with gas explosions is they're super rare, but when they happen, they're catastrophic
yeah,
and they make the news.
right,
So you see a house in Arizona explode and it's on TikTok in seconds and everybody's like, oh my God, these are the people who died. And like,
hmm,
yes, obviously it's horrible, but the
right,
reality is everybody who's sharing that never knew those people and they just want clicks
right,
and bad stuff happens all the time.
right,
But to live the life in fear, if you're a chef and you want a gas stove,
right,
get it piped in correctly by a professional plumber and tested and permitted. I
right,
did it. It's not that complicated.
right,
A lot of people do it. But I did, just like you, very much thinking about resale
right.
specifically. I was like, look, I'm never going back to electric. But if somebody buys this house and that's the only problem, they can take that stove, they
Hmm.
can pull it out,
Right,
cap that gas, and right there,
right there.
there's a regular outlet next to the 4-prong
Yeah,
electric one.
right.
They could swap a stove in seconds.
If you've got the room, why change it? Why move it? If
Yeah.
you've got the room, leave it.
Yeah.
So
And then,
and
because for me, I was going from electric to gas.
same.
So the electric, it's a giant plug. Just
Mhm.
leave it there.
Right.
I had to run a regular plug,
Hmm.
which is super easy. So there's just both back there. And then in my crawl space, I left the old, still working electric water heater. So if they wanted to abandon the gas one, they just need an electrician for 5 seconds to to take the wire from that and put it back there and switch the breaker. And they can do that. And then they can turn off the gas grill and, get a tank if they'd rather do that. And then the only thing left to switch over is the gas logs, which when I bought my house, the gas logs were set up for propane, not natural gas, and it was just stubbed out. And there was a section of my house where I was very curious why the siding was missing in this one square section. And it was because that was where the refillable propane tank was going to live. And they never put in the tank.
Mm,
So when I bought my house, the gas logs were not even active.
mm,
So I asked my realtor, I was like, what's the process? And they were like, well, call the gas company. I called them. They're like, you don't have gas service. And it's like, this much money to whatever. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And they were like, oh, well, we can give you a tank and, it'll be however big you want. And we'll fill it, every 4 months or whatever it is.
hmm.
I just never did it. I just simply never did it. And then it was actually my mother who found the stove like $1,800 on sale for $600 or something insane like that. And I was like, okay. I've been putting off getting a new stove for a lot. At this time, I think my glass cooktop was cracked even, and I had just been putting it off and putting it off. And I was like, okay, fine. I'm buying that one. It was propane, but to go from propane to natural gas is just this little regulator thing that they even give you. So I was like, okay, now's the time. I called my plumber and I was like, we're doing gas, the whole thing, you know, and it was one of those projects where started as just a stove. Started as a stove. And I was like, hey, how hard is it to connect my gas logs? And he was like, it's not hard at all. We're already here. I was like, cool, do that. Yeah. And then I'm thinking, and then I had just redone my deck and I was like, hey, if I drill a hole, how hard is it for you to run out and stub up? He was like, the cost of the pipe. I was like, oh, let's do that. And then I was like, hey, what's a water heater cost? Yeah. Yeah. And then, or actually it was, I called the gas company and I was like, I need you to run the line now. And they were like, cool, it's $1,800, $1,600. I was like, what? That's so much money. And they were like, well, you don't use enough gas to get it for free. And I was like, I need you to elaborate. And they're like, if you use enough gas, when we know we get enough money from you monthly, we'll trench it for free. And I was like, well, I'm using this, and that. They're like, that's not enough. I was like, well, what's enough? They're like, you either need heat, which I have a heat pump, all electric, was not about to switch, or you got to switch over to a water heater. And I was like, I hate my electric water heater. That's perfect. I was like, you're going to charge me almost the same amount of money as it would cost to buy the water heater. Might as well buy the water heater and have better water and great resale value of now I have a tankless Renai, which is the top of the line for water heaters. And it is nicer living with it. The shower's instant. The hot water to the kitchen is much faster.
Right. I agree. I've got one too.
Yeah.
And I love having my grill hooked up to my gas line. That's huge.
It's night and day.
I mean, I can't be hauling propane tanks around, you know. I'm just not. That's my stature's not going to do that.
I mean, I can, and I don't want to.
Right. I mean, so I agree. That's a nice luxury. Yeah.
My pops in New York, you know, he has every fuel source there is, from oil to gas to solar to electric, everything. You know, extension on extension on extension, right? So when the people show up to fill up the like giant hundreds of gallons of propane tank, he has like, you know, a bunch of those tiny grill tanks. He has like 8 of them, and he'll just like flip them. He'll give them like an extra $10 and be like, can you pop these off while you're here with the big truck? So he has like 8 of them, you know, and I'm just like, man, it would be so nice if we just trenched a little cord, stubbed up, connect. You never have to deal with it ever again. But you know, it's only a problem when it runs out in the middle of your barbecue when you have 20 people at the house.
Right.
Yeah. Which I have had happen.
Oh God.
Before I had it piped in. Luckily, my neighbor 5 houses up, I was like, hey man, I need your tank right now. I'll replace it with a full one. But I have a lot of people here, and the grill just stopped. Yeah, it was not good. So that kitchen, did you just do the wood range hood?
No. I've done wood range hoods in 3 kitchens. So, and the first one was the biggest renovation. The second one was not a big renovation. Counters. I've got a great cabinet painter that he also paints cars. So when he paints cabinets, they are as smooth as like a baby's bottom. I mean, they really feel like a factory finish. They're amazing. And so he's not as cheap because he's that good, but it's worth it. And you know, if you're trying to save money and don't want to just replace all the cabinets, you know, you can definitely change the look and do he'll do a fantastic job painting. Maybe I can give you his contact or something.
Oh yeah, sure. I'd love to,
because he's a great guy. And so, you know, I've done very different levels of renovation. Sometimes more than others. And sometimes I've decided, okay, I'm just going to paint the cabinets and do the counters and get a nicer sink and get a nicer faucet. And so it's just kind of varied. But I've always changed a kitchen and improved it. There's always been a really good before after. Only done one where I've done a master bath. It was a before after.
Okay.
And but I'd like to do that again. I'd like to do that in my current home, and I'd like to do the kitchen. And so I kind of joked with you, find me a couple clients with $1 million clients, and I'll get you over, and we'll do all this stuff, do all this work.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
Sell a couple $1 million houses.
Yeah,
you'll have some clients.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I'll call you and we'll get that done. So, and shout out to you, Corbett. So, we're talking about my windows, and my house is a house with a view, but I was like, oh, you didn't notice that? And you're like, no, and I'm like, okay, all right. You are focused on your work.
Oh yeah,
so shout out to you that you were looking at my windows. You weren't looking at what was outside my windows.
I didn't even see. You were like, "How did you not see this gorgeous pond?" I was like, "I was looking at really messed up windows. I don't know. There was nothing else there. There was
shout
no
out
pond."
to you. You focus
tunnel
on
vision.
You focus on your work.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Well, I sweat a lot, and I like my AC. And if I had my windows bowing like that, I'd want them replaced very quickly. So I was sympathetic to that particular. Also, I'd never seen it before. So in my line of work, where a lot of times it's monotonous, seeing something unique is fun. It's not fun for you, particularly right now, because your air conditioner bill is higher and you're dreading some sort of bill. No matter what, it's going to cost time and money. But for me, it's like, wow, I didn't even know windows could do that. How is the metal even bending that direction? Duh. So that was kind of cool. And then, of course, the immediate of getting one window priced, even the window person being like, bad idea, get the more expensive window priced. I was like, okay, let's do that. And then, of course, calling my installer to be like, hey, man, I need to figure out what exactly we want to do with these windows. And he's just like, well, I'm building a house in Tennessee till Saturday, so you're just going to have to wait. And luckily, he's back in town as of yesterday, so it's just like try to get stuff done immediately, and it's impossible, but it's the story of the game, So transitioning from the successful projects that you've completed, let's move more into you as the realtor. So you talked a little bit earlier about your life before a realtor, both as I think you called it a claims adjuster, and then I don't remember what the technical term was, but you said you basically did the same thing, but for like a law office.
Yeah, but I'm also a certified paralegal.
Oh, okay, and a certified paralegal. Okay,
yeah,
awesome. Okay, so you've done a lot of school.
Yeah.
And you mentioned how those were really great skills that like transferred over to the new career.
To real estate, yeah. That they are beneficial to me in real estate.
So do you have a specialty? Do you have a niche? Are you commercial? Are you residential? Do you do with land?
Not commercial. I have done some land. I've done a just not many land transactions, but I have done a few. Specialty, no. I just enjoy working with people. I do work with buyers. I'll work with sellers. I I do get some business, through referrals. I mean, the most important thing to me is to just do the best job that I can do for a client, and going over and beyond, for a client. I mean, I just feel like it's their biggest transaction they're ever going, they're going to make, and it deserves someone being very attentive that has good processes in place and good communication and good negotiation skills, and you just have to do the homework, do all the due diligence for them. That's probably, I enjoy investigative stuff, and maybe that comes from my claims background too.
I mean, definitely a little bit, for sure.
So I do enjoy, and I'm looking for permits. I'm looking for, are there any restrictive covenants in this neighborhood? I'm looking online. I'm digging. Sometimes I can get caught in rabbit holes, and go, but I like to leave no stone unturned and be sure that my client is fully informed. That is the most important thing.
So what you've described seems to be the like script of the sales pitch for every realtor I've spoken to. So without a niche, like, why would listeners want to use you versus somebody else? What separates you, I guess?
What separates me?
Yeah, because I mean, if you have a realtor that's not digging for stuff, they're not doing their job. You have a realtor who's bad at communication.
That happens, though.
It absolutely does happen, but
it happens.
But and I'm not. I guess the point I'm trying to say is, like, you're very good at the things that you just mentioned, but in my head and in a lot of people's heads, that's the bare minimum for your realtor. That's literally why they get the percentage for the property.
Right.
So if I wanted to buy land, I would go find, Stacy has given me a person who specializes in land. If I wanted a house that was, $500,000 and below, that was move-in ready and stunning in the triangle, that's Stacy's niche. If I wanted $1.3 million and above, that's Mark Simpson, as you mentioned. That's his niche. If I wanted, once upon a time, a friend and I wanted to start a brewery. We were looking at commercial space. I got via Stacy, somebody who specializes in commercial real estate. So with you saying that you don't have a niche,
well,
I'm just curious.
I don't have a niche. I'm not going to say I don't. I mean, a niche is not the way I go about my business, because, the new home buyer that I help buy a house in 4 or 5 years, when they have 2 kids, they may be buying, a much bigger house. So I really don't focus on one specific. I do have a designation for short sales and foreclosures. I do have that designation, so that does set me apart from some realtors.
Okay, can you tell me what that really means? Because I know what short sale and foreclosure means, but when you say you have
training, I've had extra training in that.
Oh, what's involved in the extra training in that?
Just hours of education and an exam, and then you get a designation.
Okay, so what do you know that somebody without that designation knows that's vital when dealing with foreclosures?
Yeah, so you just are a little more enlightened to the things that can come up with those.
Like the red flags?
Red flags, but also the processes of them, because that's huge, the processes of it.
Because you have to deal with the bank that holds the note that's been foreclosed on.
And short sales are very long transactions because you're dealing with the bank. They're
ironically called short sale, but not short.
Exactly.
So I haven't dealt with short sales really ever. So treat me like I'm a listener. I don't really know what that means. Could you elaborate a little bit more on short sales?
So you want to sell your house, and you've taken out a second mortgage or something, or you've got a home, anyway, you're underwater. You owe more on your house than it's worth.
Okay. Bad
So,
position.
Bad position
Yeah.
to be in. So you have negative equity in that house.
Right.
You owe more. So you want to sell it. So basically it's up to the bank to make the decision because, they are the debt holder and you have no equity in that house.
So the bank gets to decide because you have to sell it for less than you owe, or just because you're underwater.
The bank would love to sell it at market value, but your loan is less than the market value of that. Your loan is more than that market value of the house.
Right.
And that's not a good position to be in.
No, I understand that's a terrible position. So
you're dealing with the bank.
So
the bank's the decision maker, not the seller.
So I'm asking is let's just make up numbers so that I can understand. So let's say you owe $200,000 to the bank. Okay. Let's say the market value is $180,000. So you owe more than the value of the bank, or the value of the home, forgive me. The bank decides, obviously there's formulas and people they talk to, whatever, but the bank somehow has decided that the market value is 180 and you owe 200. So the bank can just decide that it's time to short sale, or you have to be in so much missed payments, or I'm just curious how we get there.
Right. And it varies.
Okay.
It varies because North Carolina is not a judicial foreclosure state. So a bank can foreclose on a house like that, kind of snap of the fingers. So, or they can begin that foreclosure action, and they have the right to, because you signed a deed of trust if you have a mortgage. So they have the right to begin foreclosure very, very quickly.
Don't overextend yourself. Anybody who's listening, I don't care if it's your car or your cell phone bill, but your mortgage especially. Don't any lender who says, how much do you want to spend? That's the wrong lender.
Right.
You need to go to a very smart lender that wants to actually ask you about your financial life and then give you an idea of what you should spend.
Right.
Not what you can, but what you should.
Right.
Those are very different lenders, and they're going to look the same and they're going to act the same. But just because you're approved for something doesn't mean you should spend it. Trust me, they want you to go right onto the edge of the limb, and they want it to snap because that's how they make money.
Right.
They don't actually care about your future.
Right.
So
it's
keep that in mind.
What sometimes you can get approved for, but comfort level, would you really be comfortable putting that in a mortgage?
Exactly. And that's why you should call Kat Fleetwood, who was on my podcast, who cares about your personal financial position, not the max she can get you approved for. She doesn't care about that at all. That's not interesting.
That's good.
And I can't push her name enough because she actually does care, because that stress is not put on paper.
Right.
And nobody respects how much that takes out of your life because there's not an easy number to quantify.
Right.
But the stress you feel when you're overextended, the time, and all the things associated with that compound.
Right.
If you're married, it's going to stress that. If you have a serious girlfriend, it's going to stress that. If you have kids, it's going to affect that relationship.
Right.
Money might not be put into certain things like a vacation or an extracurricular activity because you have a super high mortgage.
Absolutely. It's not worth it.
It's just not worth it because you think you need a third extra something.
It's not worth it. So
put it back in perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
And that leads to too, what makes me different, kind of like what you mentioned about Kat, was I care. And I for example, I have some first-time home buyers, and they're only in Durham because he's getting his PhD at Duke, and they'd like to get a home, and they were, and I'm taking them through some homes. They were actually the clients that I was with the day I met you. And great couple. And I think they gave me one of the best compliments. They said, she said, Margaret, I don't feel like I'm looking at homes with a realtor. I feel like you're like my mom.
I think I said the same thing to Stacy.
And she said, you're pointing out things to me about these houses and you're educating me. And she said, you know, I know you're not just after a sale. You care and you want us to get the right house for us. And she said, I can't thank you enough. And, you know, yes, it's going to take me longer to get a sale with them, but I'm going to do it the right way. And I care about them. And I'm not going to ignore if I feel the floorboard, if I feel like a little bit of a dip in the floor. I'm not going to, you know, I'm pointing that out. I'm pointing out everything.
Are you a fan of stand-up comedy?
I do love stand-up comedy.
Do you know John Mulaney?
I don't know names real well, but
He,
I do
you know,
love
skinny, dark hair, wrote for SNL, always in like a really nice 3-piece suit when he performs.
Okay.
But he has a very, very funny bit about when him and his, at the time, girlfriend or maybe newlywed wife are looking for a home. And he's just like, I loved my real estate agent. And he does this little shimmy dance. Like, she'd show up and have that mom energy. She kind of looked like my mom. She basically was our mom. And then he would like imitate her and be like, okay, so before we go in, let's have a meeting. There's no toilets. I know that was on your list, but I think I can get them to budge. And then he goes into like making fun of HGTV home buying shows. And it's really, really hysterical.
Oh, I need to watch that.
Oh, he has 3 specials on Netflix. I have no skin in that game. I'm just a fan of stand-up comedy, and he's very, very funny. But yeah, it's you will die. I was dying because I was like, I can relate. I've looked at so many houses with Stacy. She is mom energy, 100%.
And it's important, and that's what it's all about. And I mean, I've sold $1 million homes. I've sold homes as low as 200,000. You know, so I'm across the board, and there's always, the right home for my people. And
it sounds like mostly, if not exclusively, people looking to buy a home to live in, not as much like we're going to gut this as an investor.
I have worked with an investor.
Okay.
I have. I've helped an investor buy a couple homes.
But not the majority of your
Not the
work.
majority
Okay.
of it. I have helped an investor buy a couple homes. And he was good at doing his own due diligence. He didn't need me as much. I very readily am a hand holder and guide you through a transaction. You're gonna learn what comes next. You're gonna I tell you what to expect. I do the due diligence, but when you're working with a seasoned investor, they kind of do a lot of their due diligence themselves.
Also, a lot of it we skip.
Right.
Which just saves you time and energy. Like, for example, the steps and time and, we need 3 months of due diligence to have this inspection, radon, blah, 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 this, that, and the third.
Exactly.
Whereas if I'm like, hey,
right.
I'll find the listing sometimes, shoot it over to you, or in my case, Stacy, and be like, what are your thoughts? Right. And she'll be like, sounds good, whatever. And I'll be like, cool, well, we're ready to close tomorrow in cash with no inspections. Right. Because we actually don't care what we find.
That was my client, too, that I'd worked with. And he, I'd meet him there, and he'd go in the crawl space. I'd go in the ones that were high enough. And, so he knew what to look for. Yeah. And as you would, too.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I know what to look for, but also I can look at the problems that I just don't care about. Right. I'm like, there's a sag in the floor. We're ripping this floor out. Right. We'll repair that joint. That's not hard when you're doing the demo that we're doing. Right. But,
But if it needs helical piers, if it needs 5 helical piers on the,
starts to add up quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. So and that's a different kind of buyer. You know,
100%.
that's a total different kind of buyer. So yeah, I've worked with all types.
Dealing with a lot of first-time home buyers?
I've dealt with some.
Okay.
I've
I'd
dealt
love
with
to
some.
focus on them for a second.
Sure.
Because I feel like that's the majority of people that I'm trying to educate with my podcast.
Okay.
Is, the concept of the podcast was how do we bridge the massive gap of knowledge between the people who build the stuff and the people who buy the stuff.
Yeah.
And, I've had Glenn on here and we've become very good buddies, but it's him and his ex-wife who called me to their house to look at the same bathroom 3 different times before I was charging $100 a visit. So it cost me a lot of time and money and never got the job because they could not comprehend that tile goes over the lip of a tub that you can't see because of water and gravity and this, that, and the third. And that's like, so I feel like inadvertently I'm talking to a lot of first-time home buyers. And I think you mentioned it pretty spot on, and I've said it in similar words. It's the most expensive thing you're ever going to buy. Unless you're a millionaire movie star,
right?
And you drop money on yachts and stuff,
right?
For the other 99.9% of us, your home is your most expensive thing ever by a long shot.
Yep.
And I would argue, in the world of material stuff, beyond family and love and all that jazz, in the world of material stuff, it's the most important thing you're going to buy.
Right.
It's heat, it's cool, it's protection, it's shelter, it's blocking from the sun, the rain, the wind.
And hopefully a great investment.
It's where you will educate, kids, house pets, do crafts, this, that, and the cook, nourish your body, exercise, all of the above. And I don't know, it just seems that, and it's not a dig at realtors because you guys are actually doing the best you can to detangle the ball of confusingness, but it's too confusing and overwhelming for first-time home buyers.
Yeah, I could see that.
There's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of terms.
Yep.
It's a lot of money.
Yep.
Sometimes, it's not clear what's the deposit, what's going to get returned, what's for what's
right.
being used to pay who,
right.
why this extra fee exists. Oh, I didn't know I had to pay the lawyer, but lawyers don't do anything for free.
Right.
Of course you got to pay the lawyer.
Yep.
And it's, a lot of times it feels like they've been taken advantage of.
Right.
And they still at the end of the day get the home.
Right.
And I am just really curious as to the approach that you're using that might be different. Obviously if you sold a house to me and then 5 years later I have a wife and 2 kids and I'm like, hey, you did a great job, we just need more space. You have the relationship already.
Right.
I know how you operate. It was
Right.
good enough for me to call you back.
Right.
Now we're just adjusting the size of the toolbox, but
Right.
the tools are the same.
Right.
Right. But for a first-time home buyer who doesn't know what these tools look like, it's daunting. So you have to approach that differently.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what's that like? Do you have to more focus on just smiling and getting to know somebody?
No. I mean, I try to be personable, but no, I think it's educating them.
Okay.
Educating them on the process. I think that telling them, our system, how our system works, what these fees are. There's due diligence fee. There's earnest money. Letting them know which is refundable, which is non-refundable.
And for listeners, due diligence is
non-refundable
and
ever unless the seller breaches the contract and you have to sue for it.
Okay.
Ever.
Period. End of conversation.
End of conversation.
Okay. And the next one?
Earnest money.
Earnest money.
That is refundable during the due diligence period if you want to terminate the contract.
Okay. And why do you give one or both of those?
So you give the due diligence money is to compensate the seller for basically taking their home off the market
While you do your inspections.
while you do your inspections and stuff. And
Okay.
so the seller's going to want to see a high number there because that number is non-refundable
Right.
unless they breach the contract, and then the buyer's got to sue. But that's non-refundable. And
So hypothetically, if I put my house for sale and somebody was like, here's $2,000 in due diligence, and then they back out, I just keep my $2,000.
you keep it.
I just made $2,000.
Yep. Put it back on the market. Yep.
Is
So
that
you
something
want it-
people do
Oh, yeah.
and never sell the house?
Oh, God.
And
During
just
the
keep
pandemic.
just keep doing that?
Well, during the pandemic, when houses were selling within hours,
Yeah, for
And
80 over asking.
and when exactly, and more, and when they were selling that fast, and then the prices went up very high, but also mortgage rates were extremely low, and that played into that whole
Yeah,
Wild West.
Not the case anymore.
Not the case. So, yeah, I had one client that, because there were 20 offers on, I mean, some houses, the majority of the houses during the pandemic, I think it was like 76% of all houses sold had multiple offers on them.
That's honestly, that percentage seems even low to me
Yeah.
based on just witnessing it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of homes that
Absolutely.
that aren't as desirable.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
I
But-
just anecdotally, every
yeah.
friend of mine who was either I can't look anymore because
Yeah.
I don't have 90 above asking,
Yeah.
or other friends would be like, I have the 80 above asking, but I don't have the mental capacity
Yeah.
to look at a house and it's sold in 3 hours.
Yeah.
I need more time. And I was like,
Right.
that I understand more than anything.
Right.
I can't be rushed into buying something that
Right.
big. I need time. I need
Right.
to digest it. I need to sleep on it.
Right. So I had a client that really great guy, but he was very methodical. It was hard for him to just throw a lot of money. He could. He had the means to do that. But it was hard for him to just throw a lot of money at a seller for due diligence. But after losing out on about 5 houses that we made offers on, he it was so funny. He called me up. He goes, Margaret, he goes, it's been really nice working with you, but we're really tired of this. So that next house, we are going great guns after it. And I'm like, okay,
So he
great.
just put like a $20,000
$100,000.
$100,000 due diligence.
100,000.
So he rolled the dice
100,
with $100,000.
100,000 in due diligence.
Did he get the house?
He got the
I was
house.
about to say.
Got the house. I think I think we offered 50,000 over asking, and then 100,000 in due diligence. So needless to say, I was extremely clear with him, and honestly, a bit nervous.
I'd be terrified.
Honestly nervous. And I said, hey, if something big comes up, if there's something going on in the crawl space that we're not seeing, I mean, we're sticking our heads in there. I didn't see insulation sagging. I didn't see any fungal growth on the floor joists. I didn't see, the piers that I saw looked solid. There was an effervescence on the wall. I said, but I'm not a home inspector and I'm not a general contractor. These are only the things that I can see. So I am not your expert here about that. I'm your expert in real estate, but I'm not your expert on this crawl space.
Are you allowed to say, I'm not comfortable, you need a new realtor?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. But I told him, I said, look, if you're putting down that 100,000 and something big comes up on that crawl space, you bought that problem, and unless you're willing to kiss that 100,000 goodbye. Do you realize that? And he's like, yes, I realize that. I have bought that problem. I'm buying all the problems in this house. We're not walking away. This is it. And I'm
Wow.
like, okay.
That's
So it was
amazing, the frustration.
extremely- I was very nervous. We did do a home inspection. I was very, very uncomfortable. Once we got that inspection back, and he was like, "Okay, Margaret, I can live with all this." Obviously, I knew I was going to have to, but I can live with it comfortably. You would not believe the relief I felt at that point.
I could only imagine. It's that would be so terrifying. But to clarify, that 100,000 goes towards the
Absolutely.
cost.
It
It's
does.
not like an
It goes towards the
additional.
cost.
Okay.
But
Just checking.
So
It's like a deposit. It's a non-refundable deposit.
non-refundable deposit.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
and there were other transactions during the height of the pandemic, 40, 50,000 due diligence, many that were 20,000, many. I don't recall doing any that were less than 10,000 during the pandemic.
That's so much money on a gamble that you could just be like, oh, I didn't know the foundation was screwed. I'm walking away from my 10
Absolutely.
grand. That's crazy.
Absolutely.
But imagine the frustration if you're a listener. Imagine it doesn't, whether you have it's irrelevant. Imagine the frustration that the breaking point was we're putting $100,000. I mean, you had to really lose out on a lot of great houses
Yes.
and be very frustrated, or
Yes.
maybe the baby's coming, or
Yes.
whatever the example
Yes.
may have been.
Yes.
But that's an insane amount of money
Yes.
on a literal
Yes.
gamble.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's
So,
crazy.
Yeah. And then, if he had been a different kind of client that took more risk, we probably wouldn't have lost out on 5 houses. But he was not a huge risk taker.
Right.
But he became one.
So that
Unfortunately, that situation required, if they were going to, he had to become a little bit more of one.
I mean, that seller must have absolutely loved it.
Oh, the sellers were just like in hog heaven during the pandemic.
Because they got it.
They could.
That seller's like, well, I own this house and I just got a free $100,000.
Well, I mean, it went toward the price of the house, but it
Right,
felt
but either
pretty
way,
good. It felt
they're
pretty
like
good.
they're like, well, either
Yes.
we're selling this house or I got a free $100,000.
Yeah.
So like
Yes. Yes.
I mean, that's incredible.
Yes.
It's such an
So-
astronomical amount of money.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yep. It's it was a wild period of time. Things have calmed, down some. However, we have extremely low inventory here.
Yeah.
And about 75 people move to the Raleigh-Durham area every day.
Yeah, they can't build them fast
So
enough.
they can't. And builders didn't build enough homes between 2008 and now. When it crashed, they quit building. So
No, well, there's simply no one's building enough fast enough.
They can't.
Yeah.
They can't.
And,
there's no quick remedy to low inventory, because the only
No, because
remedy is building.
and what's being built, unfortunately, more than anything else, is apartment complexes, which don't help you.
Mm-mm. No.
Yeah.
And that doesn't help the people either.
Not particularly.
Yeah.
It even hurt me a little bit because
you're not building equity. You're throwing money away.
Well, I also
rent.
rent single family homes.
Right.
So
True.
like the last home,
True.
we were really close to finishing it, and then the punch list took a little bit longer, and by the time it was actually ready to show, we had gone from the height to it slowed.
Oh.
So all of a sudden we're listing at 21.95,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we ended up renting it for like $18.50.
Gotcha.
And it was just one of those things where the agency we used to rent it was like, this is what we're seeing. Let's go with 21.95, or let's go with 21. And I was like, let's do 22. See if we can't snag it, because usually we can. And for the first time in 10 houses over 10 years, normally they're online for a week and they're gone, and it's a bidding war.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you got 10 applications. Take your pick of who looks best on paper. This time it was one after another, showing after showing. No, don't like this, don't like that, too expensive. And we were like, what is happening? And then, God, who was it? Not Stacy, not Chris. Stephanie sends me this article. Stephanie is our rental point person. She sends me this article about how more or less at the same time we had this shift in market, shift in what's it called? The mortgage rate,
Mm-hmm.
and like 11 massive apartment complexes get finished all at the same time, which is the perfect storm for I got to lower the rent.
Oh.
And it just, and then of course, every week it's not rented is a week I'm paying the air conditioning bill and this,
I'd
that,
love
and the
to
third.
Send me that article. I'd like to read that.
I'll have to find it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll have to, but I know Stephanie's probably got it on her browser history or something,
Yeah.
because that's what she does. She gets properties from people like me rented.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was like, yeah, you're not even our only client, where we were like, we don't know what to do other than to tell you this is the world, and you want to drop it $100 or keep rolling the dice.
Mm-hmm.
Most people drop it in $100.
Yeah.
But we did in fact get it rented, and they're happy, and it was there yesterday. Everything's cool. But it was, it was even affecting the rental market as well. They can't build anything fast enough, except for, I guess, apartment complexes. Yeah. And they all look exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it. Not a fan.
Yeah.
Not a fan. Yeah. It's an interesting pickle to be in. Like, sure, I'd love to sell my house for twice what I bought it for. But then I have to live somewhere. So it's a fool's gold when you see how much more value the home is, because any home you want to buy went up the same amount of value.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, it's inflation at its finest.
Yeah.
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 So how would listeners go about finding you for their real estate needs?
You can find me at Fonville Marcy Real Estate. I'm in the Durham office. So you can just search the Fonville Marcy website.
Is it just fonvillemarcy.com?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. And yeah.
Do you have a Instagram or Facebook or company number?
Oh yes, I've got Instagram. I've got Instagram's very, very important to me, and I'm pretty active on it. I think I've got like maybe 2,500 followers, so that's pretty good.
What's your Instagram?
Your Carolina Home.
Your Carolina Home. There you
So
go.
find me on Instagram, Your Carolina Home. Facebook, I think it's just Margaret Sapp, Realtor.
Do you have a company number, like a cell phone number, like a company cell phone number you want to give out?
Don't want to do the cell phone on the podcast.
That's fine.
But just look me up through Fonville Marcy.
FonvilleMarcy.com.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And that, as always, the Orange Hammer podcast is on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're even on YouTube. You can email me directly, corb@wsdg.com. You can call me, 845-489-6057. If you want to be on the show, want me to talk about something specific, or need any work in and around the triangle. And there you go. Margaret, thank you so much for stopping by. This was great.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
I am glad. And we'll have to set up another one maybe around one of these projects.
Sounds great.
Awesome. All right, perfect. Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.